Welcome to the economic classes. In the series of the discussing about economics and the chapter number one, that was story of the Palampur, we had discussed about what economics is and how the word economics was derived through the constant development in the field of economics by notable economists. Also, when we started the discussion about chapter number one, that is the story of the village Palampur, we talked about the definition of production and the social bifurcation of Palampur and what facilities are available to enjoy a standard level of a life in an imaginary village that is Palampur. So this is the time that we jump now to the next level, and our next concept is the organization of production. That if we want to, if any individual wants to initiate any production activity, then what he or she requires, we will talk about that organization of production. So definition of production we had discussed earlier also. So let me recall it. That production is the mechanism through which we convert our raw materials into the goods and services, or you may call them intermediate or final goods and services. So which are basically used for the direct satisfaction of or indirect satisfaction of human wants. That was the production. It was a process of converting our raw material into finished goods or services. When we talk about any production activity, whether you want to initiate any dairy shop or you want to initiate any, you want to open any office, if you want to initiate any industry or factory, in all the production activities, you will require four basic factors of production. These are land, labor, capital, and human mind or entrepreneur. So, without these factors of production, it is not possible to derive any production or output. So, one by one, we will see that what is given in our textbook. I hope you all to join me with your textbook, opening the concept that is organization of production on page number 2. The aim of production is to produce the goods and services that we want. The line says that what is the aim behind the production? The aim is simply to satisfy the demand of the household sector, the government sector, as well as the producer sector also. So whatever the demand is put by the human beings on this earth, to fulfill these demands, there is a producer sector which takes the liability of fulfilling your various demands. Though it is said that we all human beings never put our needs more than the needs, we put our greeds before the producer sector. And that's why up to a level it is possible to satisfy your demands, but afterwards it gives or it applies a pressure on the existing resources. There are four requirements for production of goods and services. The four requirements are the four factors of production which we talked about. One by one, we'll be talking about these factors of production. The first is our land. A physical asset definitely is a physical resource. But the basic limitation with the land is that land, the area whatever we have gained on the earth, we cannot increase that area, right? We cannot add more land to the existing piece of land. Though you can purchase and in your ownership, you can increase the land definitely, but whatever the land is available on the earth, that cannot be increased. That's a bitter fact for the producer sector. So whatever the piece of land is available, we have to initiate our production activities in the limited area only. So first requirement for any production activity is the land. Without land, it's not possible to initiate any production activity. So other natural resources like you require water, forest, minerals. So as per the requirement of the production activities, people require different inputs or different natural resources. So land is one of those natural resources. Other than this, the second is labor. Labor means basically any person who is ready to work under an employer, right? or who participates. It could be an employer, or a labor could be basically working on his own, but most of the times there is always a relationship of the employer and employee whenever we refer to the concept of labor. So labor is basically that individual who participates voluntarily in the process of production for getting wages paid in lieu of the services rendered by him. So whatever the services are generated or derived from the labor, because to initiate the production activity, suppose for example, if you are a bakery owner, so you might be working yourself as a labor, or you might have hired the labor from outside. So you could see many servants working on different shops, or you could have seen many laborers working on the construction sites. You could have seen some landless laborers working on the others' fields. So these are the labors without which it is impossible to switch on our production activities. First, we talk about our physical capital. Physical capital could be of two types, but what is physical capital? Here we are talking about some tangible things, or the things which we can see, because there could be some capital or assets which is intangible, but due to our limitation of the syllabus, we will not be discussing them. Here physical asset means those inputs without which the production process would be incomplete. You have land, you have labor, but without the physical capital like fixed capital and the working capital, it is not possible to undertake the production activity. What are these fixed capital and the working capital? What is the difference between both? Let us see one by one. The fixed capital means basically those inputs which the producer requires for a very long period of time. Not only requires, but the life period of these assets or these inputs is also naturally very high as compared to our working capital, which we will see later on. For example, here of fixed capital, you may find that a farmer who is practicing the farming in the fields, he requires thresher, tractor, pump sets. So these are some assets which remain fixed in nature. Fixed in nature doesn't mean that they cannot move. They are not like immovable. So these are those assets which are used for a very long period of time, because if you consume them today, so they are not going to be depleted, or they are not going to be vanished at a time. So you can use today, then tomorrow, for the next month, for the next year. So these assets or these inputs are generally of more than definitely 1 year. Basically a long period is known as a period more than the 1 year, or period more than the 5 year, as per the different studies in economics. So for a very long period we use these assets in the production process. And another example for a physical asset, for fixed asset, that would be, if you see that if you go to any shopkeeper, then he must have a furniture, like the table might be put there, or the stands could be put there to keep their commodities, to display their commodities. So those stands or planks or the furniture which the producer is using, or you might have seen that air conditioner. So these all the assets are helpful for the production activity, for keeping the production activity continuous. And these assets or inputs are used regularly by the producer sector. Other than this, we come to the working capital now. Though there are different features of fixed capital which we'll see once we start differentiating between the fixed capital and the working capital. Now working capital means those inputs which, or those factors which you require, the producer sector requires for a very limited period of time, like or for day-to-day transactions, like raw material is there, cash in hand is there. So cash in hand means whatever the cash you require for your day-to-day requirements. So that could be your working capital. That means for the day-to-day transactions, you require kind of, you need to pay octroi, you need to pay freight, for the transportation of your goods, you need to pay some kind of a toll tax if you are, there is a regular transportation is there. So these are the working cash in hand which you require to pay to the daily transactions. So what is the difference now between the fixed capital and the working capital? Fixed capital is used for a very long period of time, whereas the working capital is used for a very limited period of time, and at times it is used once at times. Another difference is that the fixed capital, it is charged depreciation. Now, what is the depreciation? Depreciation means whatever the normal wear and tear an asset faces after using it or while consuming it, then, or any, in simple words, like if you find any fall in the value of any asset after a period of time, suppose today you have bought a car, or you have bought a tractor here, being a farmer, then I don't think that if you have purchased it today at rupees 5 lakh, then in the next year the value of tractor is going to be decreased. Why? Because of normal wear and tear. So that is, in simple words, a normal use of tractor. After using some commodities, their value generally is decreased after a period of time. So that reduction or that decrease in the value of this asset is known as depreciation. Other than the normal wear and tear, there are some kind of expected obsolescence which are also responsible for the reduction in the value of these assets. So basically, these assets, the producers, they maintain depreciation reserve funds. Though it is an accounting concept, but it must be understood by you at this level only, because depreciation reserve fund helps the producer to replace the asset once the life of this asset is over. That means what? Suppose today you have purchased a tractor that is worth rupees 5 lakh, and you assume that every year you charge 10% depreciation. That means 10% fall will be there every year in the value of this tractor. Suppose today it is 5 lakh, in the next year 10% you reduce, that is 50,000, the value will be remaining 4,50,000. So for next 10 years, we will see that the value of tractor will be nil, and our depreciation reserve fund, or a kind of, you maintain some sort of piggy banks at home. In the same way, the producer sector also maintains depreciation reserve fund, a fund which helps them to replace the existing asset with a new one. So if you maintain this fund with you, then after a stage you will be able to use this fund for purchasing a new asset. Other than this, if we talk about working capital, we don't maintain any kind of depreciation. We do not charge even the depreciation, so there is no question of depreciation reserve fund for the working capital. You suppose if you are a bakery owner and you want to produce bread. For bread you require flour, and flour will be your raw material. So once you purchase it, it is consumed at a time and it is converted into the bread. So that's all the role of flour. So there is no depreciation charged here. So these are some major differences between the fixed capital and working capital. If we see further, the third requirement is physical capital as given in our textbook. The variety of inputs required at every stage during production. What are these items? Let us see. Tools, machines, buildings. So these are some examples of given in the textbook of fixed capital. So these inputs you can see as written in our textbook also, that the inputs are used for a very long period of time, or they are used frequently. If we talk about the working capital, then raw materials and money in hand. So these are some inputs, which you require for your day-to-day transactions, as we have seen. And the fourth requirement now, because land, labor and capital is done, the fourth very important requirement, that is the human mind, which we discussed earlier also. Without the human mind, we cannot make the use of these three inputs, the three former inputs like land, labor and capital. So this was the summary. Now we see that what is the status of farming in Palampur. In Palampur, we see that the 75% of the people who are working are dependent on farming for their livelihood. So 75% people are engaged in the farming activity, and the remaining 25% people are engaged in the non-farming activities like dairy or shopkeeping or transportation or any other work. But remember that there is a basic constraint, that means a limitation in raising farm production. Land area under cultivation is practically fixed because it cannot be increased. Since 1916 Palampur, there has been no expansion in land area. If you find the expansion in the land area, then this is not possible from 1960 onwards. Let us see further what is given. So from 1960 onwards, we see that there is no expansion in the land area under cultivation. By then, some of the wastelands in the village had been converted to cultivable land. So this is the way that how we can increase the production by adding more land. So here, basically, we have not increased the size of the land, but we have converted the wastelands or the barren lands, you could say, into the fertile one. So that could be possible. And now the production of the crops can be increased. So there could be an opportunity or possibility for the farmers to increase the production in the farming area by using the wastelands, by converting the wastelands into the cultivable land. So there exists no further scope to increase farm production by bringing new land under cultivation. So once you have utilized your wastelands, now what will you do? Suppose 100 hectares was under cultivation. 20 hectare more was possible because it was, let us assume that 20 hectares was a wasteland in the Palampur. So farmers, they have added this 20 hectares now in the total cultivable area. But now overall area is 120 hectares. Beyond it, it is not possible for the farmers to add more land. So that means what? Should we assume here that the production on 120 hectares of this land will always remain same? That means, in case if we neglect or if we ignore all the negative aspects of farming, that means it could be a very heavy rainfall, or it could be a kind of storm, or pitfalls could be there which destroy the output, or which destroy the crop or yield of the farmers. Let us assume that there is no negative aspect. So that means if we see that from the 120 hectares of land, the maximum level of output which is possible, let us assume that 1000 kilograms or 10,000 kilograms of the wheat. So that means here the level of output is fixed because the land cannot be increased. Every time if there is no negative aspect, then the maximum output which the farmers can produce is only 10,000 kilograms of the wheat. Now the level of income will remain same every year in case the farmers, they could be able to produce 10,000 kilograms. That means there is no further scope for the farmers to increase the land area. Do we need to assume this? Because this is what comes like a restriction on the growth of the farmers. Farmers cannot go up. So this is why the farmers or the government or the different institutions try to increase, try to first start thinking that how to increase the production on the existing land area or total cultivable land area. So what we come to the solution is that we need to jump from the, or we need to switch from the conventional farming methods to the modern farming methods. What were the conventional farming methods? You must have seen the geography too, or in the history as well. You might have seen that there were Persian wheels which were used to pull the water from the wells. Other than this, there were kind of bullock carts which were used for the plowing fields. So these are some traditional methods, or there could be traditional seeds. But now this is the need of the hour of introducing modern farming methods. And if we see that introduction of the modern farming methods was already done in India when we introduced Green Revolution by M.S. Swaminathan in India. He was the father of Green Revolution in India. So right from the 60s we started to introduce Green Revolution in India, and definitely there was a big success, but it was limited within some or a couple of states of India. So now what are those modern farming methods? Let us see. If you switch from traditional seeds to the HYV seeds, HYV seeds means here high yield variety seeds, because after a lot of research in science, the scientists are able to sell, or they are able to introduce such seeds in the market which derive a better productivity or higher productivity as compared to the traditional seeds. So HYV seeds, you need to switch from traditional ones to HYV seeds. That was the number one example. Other than this, you need to use the fertilizers or the pesticides in order to protect and to grow your crop on the limited area of land, because it is seen that even in the recent days, you must have heard about the Pakistan had to declare an emergency due to the locusts, kind of insects, locusts, which destroyed complete the farming industry of Pakistan in this financial year 2019-20. I'm talking about the previous financial year, basically 2019-20. Right now, the 2020-21 is the financial year. So in Pakistan, they had to declare. So these are some things, though, which do not happen frequently or every day, but there is always a threat that the insects or the locusts which may destroy our farming or the crops. So to protect our crops from these insects, we need to add some kind of pesticides so that even the other animals or small animals, reptiles, they cannot destroy our farms. Other than this, to increase the productivity, the farmers nowadays they use fertilizers. Before it, they were using natural manure, which was prepared with the dry leaves, the cow dung, and other inputs. So that was the traditional method. Now we introduce fertilizers. That is our modern farming method. So that is an example that how to switch from the traditional methods to the modern farming method. Other than this, farmers were also suggested and guided for introducing multiple cropping method, because earlier the farmers were limited to the production of only a particular crop on their field. Now farmers have started the production of multiple crops at a time on the limited or the existing piece of land. So these are the two ways through which we see that production on the same piece of land can be increased, because let us recall that we cannot increase the area under cultivable after using all the waste land and whatever the available land is. The size of land cannot be increased. It is limited. The resources are scarce. We need to keep the very basic important line of economics, and that is that if resources are scarce, they are limited. So through the modern farming methods and through the multiple cropping, we can increase the production on the same piece of land, if we talk about here the farming industry. So here we wind up our discussion on is there a way one can grow more from the same land, and also we had seen that what is the status of farming in Palampur. Thank you.